Hey, welcome back to our channel. I'm Jared from 3Cs and this is Braxton. Got some friends helping us as well. We have a 2016 RM85. This is that project bike that we bought, well, one of them. And we've got some other videos, so check out our channel on that. But what we're doing today is we're rebuilding the forks on it. They're leaking pretty good. We knew this originally. If you watched the other videos, we already bought this whole seal kit plus the bushings. We planned on doing this. It's snowing outside. It's April 19th and there's 2 inches of snow, so great day to do this. We'll give you guys a rundown of what we have on the counter here. So what you're going to need at the end of it to check your fluid level is this, and you can also just do it with a quick mix cup if you want. This is going to help us reinstall the seals so we don't hurt the seals going over the fork tube. We got our seal driver. This is for the 37mm forks. We went ahead and bought the tools because with these kids riding 85s for at least 3 or 4 more years, I want to have the tools here on hand. We got our fork fluid. I like to have starting fluid around. We're going to clean all the internal components with that. This is our kit. I already did the right hand fork, so we'll just show you guys how to do the left hand. And then just some random sizes here. So the first thing I like to do while the fork tube is still on the bike and the bottom clamps are still tight, I like to crack the cap now. It's frustrating if you're trying to hold the bottom tube on the counter and try to spin that off there. So what we'll do first is we'll just spin the cap loose here. Now that the cap is loose, I can just crack the bottom pinch bolts and we can slide the fork tube right out of the bottom here. So now that the fork is off the bike, we're just going to use our 17mm and spin this off the rest of the way. And now we're going to be able to dump the fluid out. This is what the internals look like. And let's check out how the fluid looks in this. Oh my goodness. Yep, it needed to be changed. That's pretty old fluid. So you're going to let this drain for a few minutes. And once this drains, we'll then come back and we'll take the cap off the dampening rod. So now what we're going to do is we got to get this cap off the top of the dampening rod. I'm going to pull down on the spring and pull up on the cap with the same hand. And that's going to create some room in here. And I'm going to stick the 14mm right inside there. Now that it's in there, it'll hold itself. And now I can unscrew the cap from the top of this. Once you crack it, it should go pretty easy here. And on this cap, we should have the rod that goes all the way down through. And so we're gonna, this is where the starting fluid is gonna come into play. We're gonna clean all this up. So we'll set that down. And now our spring can come out. And again, we're gonna clean that as well. And the dampening rod, we're gonna tip this here. We're going to tip it upside down and we're going to crank it a bunch of times to get as much fluid out as we can. This is all that old nasty fluid. If you don't change your fork oil every year or two, it'll look like this, but this is a 2016 and I doubt after, they don't have a date on here when they did it last, but it definitely needed it. So now that that's mostly drained, we'll just clean it up as we're doing the job. Now we're actually going to get to the fork seals here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a Phillips head screwdriver. Kind of zoom in more there. Hit that light button on top. So now we're going to take our flathead screwdriver and pry it in the crease here. We're just going to pry that down. And that's going to expose the clip that's inside of here. That's actually, this is just more of a dust cover. This isn't the actual fork seal. The fork seal's on the inside of this dust cover here. So I'm just using my pick tool and I'm getting rid of this clip. That's what's keeping this whole unit together here. So now that our clip is removed, we've got the fork spring out the other end. Now we're just going to pull this apart. And you might think you're doing it wrong, but you really just got to pull on it hard a couple times. And be careful so you don't get all nasty oily. So that's why I put cardboard down, because you're gonna have a bunch of oil that comes out. I suppose if you had more time and you wanted to let it dangle overnight and drain, you could. But we just want to get this back together. So here's our outer tube. You can see how nasty that is in there. This is where our starting fluid is going to come into play. I like to tip it up like that, and then I'll take a rag that I have been using, I'll ball it up. Set it right there. And I'll use the fork spring to push it down. And you'll see down here all the crap that comes out the bottom. And that helps clean this out a little bit. Now I can take some starting fluid and a new rag and we'll clean this out right here. So now you can see our inner tube is really cleaned out. It's looking good. Just a little bit left here. So I'm happy with that. We can reinstall when we're ready. The outer tube's ready. I have no one else paper towels right there. I also like to take a paper towel and go down the spring itself. That way it gets all that old oil. It doesn't look all dirty when you put the new oil back in there. We'll clean our whole top cap assembly here as well. You can see all the dirt and grime that's inside of these forks here, so it's a good thing we took it apart. Alright, so now we're actually going to get these bushings off and get the old fork seals that are leaking off. We're going to pull the upper bushing off, and you can see how worn that is. Pretty worn on there. We're going to take a regular screwdriver, and it helps me separate this inner bushing. You can feel the notch right there. We're going to stick this in there and separate it. And kind of slide it up off the fork tube. It's important to pay attention to this fork seal when you take it off. You'll notice that there's two lips facing up to help hold the oil in, and then one lip facing down. The GoPro is not going to focus on this, but just when you do it, when you take this off, just pay attention to that. So I put it face down. We're going to reuse this washer. We'll have to clean that up. We have our clip that holds everything together, and then this is our dust seal. So the next thing that I'm going to do is we're just going to clean all of this up really good. I don't have the tool to take the dampening rod out of the end of the lower fork tube on the RMs. What you would do is you'd have a tool that would come down in here and hold the dampening rod still, and you would take your socket and you would unscrew the end cap. I'm not worried about that. We're just going to clean this out the best that we can. We're going to hang it upside down for a minute, drain some more of this fluid out. Then we'll take the starting fluid and we'll get it all cleaned up. And once it's all cleaned up, we'll come back and I'll show you guys how to reassemble this thing. All right, we're going to rebuild the lower fork tube for you guys. And we'll start right here at the bottom. Normally I have these little bolts that would fit over here, and I thought I had one for this bike, but I guess I don't. So we're just going to use some fork oil, and I've done enough of these that I don't think that I'll hurt the fork seal. So we're going to start with a dust scraper. Some people put like saran wrap on here, and you can do that, but I've done enough of these that I think I can slide it over the top without hurting it. So I got our dust scraper on. We're going to slide our clip on. We're going to go with a fork seal. And like I had mentioned last time, make sure you put both seals facing up. Or just look at your old ones and you're taking it apart and make sure it matches. So we've got that on. We're now going to do our washer. We're going to do our two bushings next. We'll slide those on. And now we'll get it right up in the fork tube here. And we'll get our whole assembly. We're going to push this right up in here. And this is where our seal driver is going to come into play. So we'll grab those. So this is our 37mm fork seal driver. We're going to slide it right on the fork tube. And we'll connect it together there. And we're going to slide this a couple times. And now look up in here. And we have a little ways to go. We got to get it so this clip over here can fall back in its groove. Alright, so now you can see if you look up in here, we've got it far enough up in that our clip is going to sit right in its groove. So you kind of pinch the clip. So you can kind of pinch that. And we'll slide it up in. I'll take a screwdriver. And we'll push that clip in the rest of the way. And you kind of hear it click into place. And then we'll put a little bit more fork oil in here just to kind of lube everything up. And we'll get our dust seal back up in as well. Okay, the next step is going to be to refill our fork with oil. And every brand and every model is a little bit different, so refer to your owner's manual. This is like 11.6 ounces is what this particular bike wants. So I'm going to just pull the dampener rod up just a little bit. You might not be able to fit all the oil in originally because our dampener rod's completely empty. So if you look down in here, you can see that there's quite a bit of oil right at the top there. And I have to work this dampener rod. They want you to do it at least 10 times. And you can hear that. And you can feel that there's no oil inside of here yet. And so the more that I work this, the more oil it's going to suck inside the dampening rod. And this is a super important part of redoing these forks, is making sure that that dampening rod is full of oil before you finish the job. So now that it's down lower, we can finish topping it off. And I'm going to spend a few minutes just kind of working this back and forth. And be careful pulling on this too fast. The oil will shoot out of the center of this on the RM, so don't move this rod too fast, you'll get covered in oil. So now that we've poured the 11.6 ounces in here, there could be some oil left inside of this fork tube that I didn't get out when I originally dumped it out. So what you can do is you can check your oil level. This bike is calling for 124 millimeters from the top is where they want the oil level. So I've set that on the gauge here, and I can use my tool and I can just suck out the extra. So even if there is a little bit of old oil in there, and you can kind of see we're getting some out. So there was a little bit of old oil inside of there that I wasn't able to get out when I was pushing the rod back and forth. So we'll get this out. There we go. So now we know that our oil level is exactly 124 millimeters from the top, and that's what the manual's calling for. So now that we've done that, we can reinstall our spring. And this gets pretty tricky on these that, oh, see, if you go too fast, it'll come out on you. There's normally a tool that would screw on the top of the dampening rod that would hold this up during this process, but if you're fast enough, you can get it down and then catch it there. All right, so now we've got our rod worked to the top. We're gonna slide our center in here, our cap, and we'll hand screw the cap on here. We'll grab our 14 and we'll slide it inside of there. And each bike has a different torque value on this. So I'll let you guys read your manual on what they want. We'll torque this real quick. All right, so now that that's torqued, we can pull our 14 millimeter back out. And we're done on the inside. We can slide our outer fork tube up. And we can finish this up. And the last thing is going to be tightening our fork cap. And again, depends on your manual. Depends on what they want this set at. I think this bike happens to be like 22 foot-pounds. So we'll get this torqued back down and we can get it reinstalled in the bike. The last thing I like to do, and I'll mention real quick, is I like to clean the outside of the fork tubes with starting fluid. Now that they're all oily, it'll help keep this dry and clean. That way when we reinsert it inside the triple clamps, it goes in like it should. So thanks for tuning in. This was Jared at 3C's Recreation. This is our RM85 project. If you want to follow along, subscribe to our channel and check out the other videos. Thanks.